They broke into my garage without a word, took the machine I built with my bare hands, a snow-clearing robot, quiet, loyal, precise. They said it was unsafe. Then their president, Karen, used it to clear her own driveway like she owned it. She fined me when I asked questions, called me a threat when I demanded answers. But when the blizzard hit, and her door was buried in 6 feet of snow, when the street went dark and her heat failed and no one came, that's when she realized the robot still listened to one voice. Mine. She thought she'd taken control. She never saw it coming when I took it back inch by inch, snow by snow. And by the time she begged for help, it was too late. Because in this neighborhood, winter doesn't ask permission. And neither do I. After 40 years of troubleshooting machines under fire and managing controlled chaos on military bases halfway around the world, I thought I had earned the right to a quieter chapter. I moved to a small snow-wrapped neighborhood in northern Minnesota shortly after burying my wife, chasing the kind of silence that only arrives after a heavy blizzard, thick, muffling absolute. The houses here sat in neat rows, roofs pitched sharp against the sky, driveways bordered by evergreens, bowed low with ice. The neighborhood looked orderly, almost serene. A little too orderly, I would soon learn. The HOA rules arrived in a crisp manila envelope the day I closed on the house. Approved exterior paint colors, maximum holiday light, wattage mandatory sidewalk clearance, within 24 hours of snowfall. I skimmed them, signed where required, and filed them away. I wasn't here to start wars over lawn height. I just wanted black coffee by a frosted window and the low hum of wind through bare branches. Winter in this part of Minnesota isn't a season, it's an occupation. The cold settles in like an uninvited guest who refuses to leave, bringing wave after wave of wet, bone-deep snow. I shoveled the old-fashioned way for 2 winter shoulders, burning back, sending sharp warnings with every scoop. By the 3rd November, I'd had enough. So I did what I'd always done. When faced with a problem, I built a solution. I named him Otto. He started as a pile of salvaged parts on my garage workbench, military surplus treads from a decommissioned reconnaissance drone, a reinforced aluminum scoop I fabricated myself, LiDAR sensors for obstacle avoidance, and a small but powerful electric motor that purred instead of roared. I added a high-resolution camera on a swivel mount, a remote access module, and a simple 3-note chime he would play when the job was done. Nothing flashy, just reliable. The first time I watched Otto roll down my driveway on his own, pushing a perfect ridge of powder to the side, something loosened in my chest. The treads crunched softly over packed ice, the scoop lifted and dumped with mechanical grace, and when he finished, those 3 cheerful notes floated through the frigid air like a small victory. I stood on the porch in my parka coffee steaming in my gloved hand, and felt for the first time in years a quiet sense of purpose. Word spread slowly. The elderly couple 2 doors down, Mr. and Mrs. Hanley, found their walkway mysteriously cleared one morning. A young mother pushing a stroller no longer had to wrestle through drifts to reach the mailbox cluster. Kids gathered on the corner one afternoon, phones out laughing as Otto performed his little ta-da flourish at the end of a run. I never announced it. I just expanded his route a little each week, letting him help where help was needed. Then came Karen. I didn't know her name at first. I only knew the white luxury SUV that always parked nose in the fur-lined boots she wore, even on dry days, the way she walked as though the sidewalk ought to part for her. She appeared one February afternoon while Otto was finishing the shared path in front of the community mailboxes. "You can't operate that thing here," she said, voice clipped, eyes fixed somewhere past my shoulder. I tapped my phone to pause him. Otto stopped mid-turn, scoop lowered politely. "He's just clearing the walk." No one else had gotten to it yet. "It's not about the snow," she replied, adjusting oversized sunglasses despite the gray sky. "It's about liability. What if it injures a child? It has collision avoidance, better than most cars on the road." She offered a tight smile that never reached her eyes, flipped the end of her scarf, and strode away, boots clicking against the salted concrete. I watched her go, a faint irritation settling in my gut. I'd spent decades around people who wielded small authority like a weapon. I recognized the type. The next morning, a notice was taped to my front door in a plastic sleeve to protect it from the weather. Notice of non-compliant activity. Unauthorized autonomous device on community property. HOA letterhead bullet points about safety protocols, vague references to state statutes, and a fine schedule that began for the moment with warning only. I snorted, crumpled it, and dropped it into the drawer I reserved for junk mail. Then I sent Otto out again. I should have known warnings were only the opening salvo. A week later, I returned from the grocery store to find my garage door yawning open in the cold. Otto's charging dock sat empty. Cables lay scattered across the workbench like shed skin. My stomach tightened. I pulled up the security feed on my phone, rewinding with fingers that had gone suddenly cold. There she was, Karen leading two men in official HOA windbreakers up my driveway. One carried a clipboard, the other a pair of bolt cutters that glinted under the motion light. They moved with practiced efficiency, panel popped. Override port, accessed, Otto lifted onto a dolly, and wheeled away. Karen stood at the curb, arms folded, directing them with small, imperious gestures. I paused the frame on her face, calm, satisfied. Something inside me shifted, not rage, not yet, but a cold, focused clarity I hadn't felt since my last deployment. I'd spent a lifetime solving problems under far worse pressure than a suburban power play. But this felt personal in a way combat never had. She hadn't asked, hadn't knocked. She had simply taken. I opened the locked drawer beneath my workbench and removed the backup transmitter, a failsafe I'd built for situations exactly like this. My thumb hovered over the override key. A soft ping confirmed connection. Otto was still online, somewhere. A slow breath fogged in the frigid garage air. Then I pressed record. The theft happened on a Tuesday that felt ordinary. Until it wasn't. The sky was a flat, iron gray sheet, the kind that promises snow, but holds back just to toy with you. I'd driven into town for groceries, coffee beans, eggs, the heavy cream I allowed myself as a small luxury. When I returned, the garage door stood wide open, a dark rectangle against the white siding. Cold air poured out like breath from an empty chest. Otto was gone. His charging dock sat vacant, cables dangling like cut lifelines. Tools lay scattered across the bench my socket set, knocked over a screwdriver on the floor. Someone had been in a hurry. I set the grocery bags down slowly, heart thudding with a rhythm I remembered from long ago patrols alert, but not yet panic. I pulled up the security feed on my phone. The timestamp read 11:17 a.m. There was Karen striding up my driveway, as if she owned it, flanked by two men in matching HOA windbreakers, the color of caution tape. One carried a clipboard and wore the expression of a man who hated his job. The other hefted bolt cutters that caught the weak sunlight. Karen pointed sharp, economical gestures, while the men popped the side panel on the garage door opener, disabled the safety sensor, and raised the door manually. They moved with the quiet efficiency of people who believed rules were armor. Otto sat docile on his dock lights, dim in standby. The man with the clipboard unplugged him, checked something off a form, and together they wheeled him out on a dolly. Karen never once looked toward the camera. She didn't need to. She knew exactly where it was. I froze the frame on her face, lips pressed, thin eyes bright with triumph, and felt something old and cold uncoil in my gut. Not the hot anger of youth, but a deliberate glacial fury, honed by decades of keeping calm, while everything around me burned or froze. I closed the garage door with the manual pull cord, the chain rattling like distant gunfire. Then I walked to the back of the workbench, opened the false panel I'd built the day I moved in, and took out the backup transmitter. Military habit, never trust a single point of failure. The signal connected instantly. A green dot pulsed on my tablet screen. Otto was alive, battery at 92% GPS coordinates, placing him 4 streets over, right in the middle of Karen's curved, brick-paved driveway. I exhaled slowly, fogging the cold air, and whispered to the empty garage, "Gotcha." That evening, I did something I'd avoided since moving here. I attended the monthly HOA meeting. The clubhouse smelled of burnt coffee and floral air freshener. Folding chairs scraped against linoleum as residents filed in, murmuring about holiday light wattage and the rising cost of snow removal contracts. I took a seat in the second row, coat still on phone recording silently in my inner pocket. Karen presided from the front table like a queen on a budget throne, cream cashmere sweater. Manicured nails tapping a polished folder, hair sprayed into perfect obedience. She clicked through slides with the detached confidence of someone who had never been told no. When she reached item 6, Community safety unauthorized autonomous devices, the room quieted. A grainy photo of Otto appeared on the screen mid-sweep on the mailbox path. This device, she said, voice smooth as packed ice, has been operating on shared walkways without board approval, liability insurance, or safety certification. The board has voted to confiscate it pending review. A voice from the back, Mr. Hanley, rose tremulously. That little machine cleared our walk 3 times this month. Saved my hips a world of hurt. Karen's smile thinned. We appreciate helpful gestures, but order must be maintained. Imagine the lawsuit if it malfunctioned. It has better sensors than your SUV, I said, calm and clear. Heads turned. Karen's gaze snapped to me like a trap closing. Miles, isn't it? She asked, as though we were meeting for the first time. No one is targeting individuals. This is about protecting the community. Funny, I replied. I built it to prevent slips on ice. Unlike the HOA, which left the sidewalks buried for 4 days after the last storm. Low chuckles rippled through the room. Karen's cheeks colored faintly, but she recovered with practiced grace. Let's stay on topic, she said. The device has been secured for evaluation. Further unauthorized operation will result in fines. Secured, I repeated. You mean removed from my private property without consent or court order? Her eyes narrowed. Bylaws allow inspection of potential hazards. They don't allow breaking and entering. The treasurer cleared his throat awkwardly. Karen moved briskly to the next slide, approved mailbox, flag colors, as if the exchange had never happened. But my phone had caught every word. Later that night, alone in the quiet house, I poured a finger of bourbon I rarely touched and opened Otto's internal logs. The footage was time-stamped, high definition, undeniable. There was Karen standing on her own porch the previous afternoon, latte in hand, watching Otto make perfect passes along her driveway. She'd even waved him toward the garage sensors, clearing a path for her SUV. At one point, she laughed, and said to someone off camera, "This thing is better than any service I've hired." I saved the clip to 3 separate drives. Then I emailed a copy to Alan Ramos, code enforcement officer and son of my old commanding officer, with a simple note. Thought you might find this interesting. The reply came within minutes. She really thinks she can just take it. She already did. Then let's make sure she learns the difference between borrowing and stealing. I set the glass down untouched and stared out at the dark street. Fresh flurries had begun to fall soft and relentless, erasing footprints, covering sins. Somewhere 4 houses away, Otto sat under Karen's porch light, waiting for my next command. I didn't send one, not yet. Winter had only just begun, and patience, I'd learned long ago, was the sharpest weapon of all. The days following the theft settled into a brittle routine. Mornings tasted of strong black coffee and the metallic tang of unresolved anger. I'd sit at my office window watching the neighborhood stir under thin winter light, cars backing out slowly over packed ice breath, clouds rising from muffled figures hurrying to mailboxes. Everything looked normal. Except my garage felt hollow, the empty charging dock a silent accusation. But Otto was far from silent. His telemetry streamed steadily to my tablet battery levels, motor temperature, camera feeds, even ambient audio. Every evening, like clockwork, Karen activated him. Not with my app, she'd apparently discovered the simple gesture controls I built in for emergencies, but with impatient waves of her gloved hand. From the wide-angle lens, I watched her direct him along the elegant curve of her brick driveway, brushing powder away from her garage sensors, sculpting perfect edges around her stone planters. She treated him like a new appliance she'd ordered online, and couldn't quite believe had arrived so cheaply. One night, the temperature dropped to -12. I sat wrapped in an old wool blanket, the house creaking around me like an old ship. On screen, Karen stepped outside in a long camel coat, thermos in hand, steam curling from the lid. She watched Otto complete a final pass, then patted his camera housing the way one might pat a well-behaved dog. "Good boy," she said, voice clear through the onboard mic. "Much better than that overpriced service." She laughed, a short, satisfied sound, and disappeared inside. The porch light flicked off, leaving Otto alone, under the faint glow of street lamps. I leaned back, letting the blanket slip from my shoulders. The anger was still there, but it had cooled into something sharper, more useful. I'd spent years documenting equipment failures in war zones, cataloging every malfunction, every breach of protocol. This was no different, just smaller stakes and colder weather. I created a new folder on an encrypted drive, leverage, Every clip, when in time-stamped, watermarked backed up in 3 separate locations. Karen directing traffic with imperial gestures. Karen laughing about the idiot who built it. Karen bragging to a friend on the phone, voice drifting through the open front door. I told the board we needed better snow management and look problem solved. I didn't watch the footage for pleasure. I watched it the way I once watched surveillance feeds, clinically looking for patterns, weaknesses, moments that would matter later. A few days after the meeting, another notice appeared under my windshield wiper while I was at the hardware store buying heavy-duty extension cords. This one carried a $50 fine for hostile conduct during official proceedings. I folded it neatly and added it to the drawer that was quickly becoming an evidence archive. That same afternoon, I drove downtown to meet Alan Ramos. We sat in a small diner that smelled of bacon grease and decades-old coffee. Alan, broad-shouldered, close-cropped hair going silver at the temples, listened without interrupting while I laid out the timeline. I slid a thumb drive across the chipped Formica table. Everything's on there, I said. Security footage of the entry internal logs showing ongoing use HOA bylaws with the sections they violated highlighted. He turned the drive over in his thick fingers. My old man always said you were the calmest man under fire he'd ever met. Your old man exaggerated. Alan grinned. He also said never to play cards with you. He pocketed the drive. This isn't criminal yet, but it's definitely civil. And the city doesn't like HOAs that think they're sovereign nations. I nodded. I'm not looking for headlines, just for her to realize some things aren't hers to take. He leaned forward. Give me a week to run it through channels, quietly. We shook hands outside in the wind. Flakes had started to fall again, fat and lazy, the kind that pile up fast if you ignore them. Back home, I kept Otto on a tight leash. Literally. I sent no aggressive commands, only subtle diagnostics to keep the connection alive. He stayed within Karen's property lines, obedient to her gestures, recording everything. I wanted her comfortable, confident. I wanted her to believe she'd won completely, because the deeper someone digs their own hole, the harder it is to climb out. One evening, Paul, the neighbor, who'd once texted me, asking if Otto could clear his walk, knocked on my door holding a plate of oatmeal raisin cookies still warm from the oven. My wife baked these, he said, shifting awkwardly. Heard about the trouble. Just wanted to say, we miss seeing your little tank out there. I accepted the plate. He's not gone for good. Paul glanced toward Karen's house lights glowing behind drawn curtains. She's been bragging about her new snow system. Told Marilyn at the mailbox it was part of some HOA pilot program. I felt that cold clarity again. Pilot program, huh? Yeah, he shrugged. Some folks believe her. Most of us, we're just waiting to see how this plays out. After he left, I stood on the porch a long time, watching my breath crystallize and vanish. The street was quiet, except for the soft hiss of snow against evergreen branches. Somewhere in the dark, Otto's camera eye blinked patiently, storing every second of Karen's growing arrogance. I went inside, poured a fresh cup of coffee, and opened the remote interface. Battery 97%. Ambient temperature 8 degrees. Status idle. Awaiting command. I didn't send one, not yet. Instead, I added a new script, subtle, invisible. A low-profile mode that would activate only when certain conditions aligned, heavy snowfall, low visibility, and Karen alone on her property. I saved it under a simple name, Drift. Then I closed the laptop, listened to the wind rattle the windows, and allowed myself the smallest flicker of anticipation. Winter wasn't finished with us, and neither was I. The invitation arrived like a summons to a court-martial, only printed on heavier stock and scented faintly with whatever perfume Karen favored. Escalated behavior review, Miles Weaver. Attendance mandatory. I read it twice in the kitchen, steam from my coffee curling around the words. A slow, incredulous laugh escaped me. They weren't content with fines and theft. Now they wanted to put me on trial for asking questions. I showed up 15 minutes early, dressed for the weather, more than the occasion, heavy wool coat, old army boots polished out of habit, thermal hat pulled low. The clubhouse felt smaller than I remembered, the fluorescent lights buzzing like insects trapped in glass. 6 board members sat behind a long plastic table, tablets and binders arranged like fortifications. Karen occupied the center seat, posture perfect, a ceramic HOA mug steaming gently beside her stack of documents. Mr. Weaver, she said without rising, without offering a chair. Thank you for coming. We may begin. I remained standing, hands clasped behind my back, in parade rest, an old posture that steadied the pulse. The room smelled of stale donuts and tension. The treasurer, a thin man with nervous fingers, cleared his throat. This special session addresses repeated noncompliance with neighborhood technology standards and inappropriate conduct during official proceedings. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Is this a disciplinary hearing? I asked quietly. Karen's eyes flicked to me. It is an administrative review. Then I'm recording. I held up my phone, red dot glowing. Minnesota is one-party consent. I'm informing, not asking. A ripple of unease passed across the table. The vice president, Fred, I think his name, was shifted in his seat. Karen's lips pressed into a colorless line. Proceed, she said coolly. They recited the charges like a liturgy: unauthorized vehicle on common property, failure to seek prior approval for technological installations, hostile demeanor at the previous meeting. Each accusation landed with the dull thud of paperwork. When they finished, Karen folded her hands. Do you have anything to add? A few questions, I replied. She inclined her head with exaggerated patience. Who signed the authorization to enter my garage and remove private property? The board voted collectively. No, I interrupted gently. I asked who physically signed the order. Silence. I continued. What insurance rider covers HOA personnel using bolt cutters on private residences? Which statute grants seizure of unregistered personal equipment without due process? Fred swallowed audibly. And while we're clarifying policy, I went on voice, still level. Could someone explain the safety review process applied to the confiscated robot before it was pressed into daily service on your driveway, Ms. Delaney? Karen's composure cracked, just a hairline fracture, but I saw it. Her fingers tightened around the mug handle. Technicians observed the unit, she said. Documentation. That's not required for. It is, I said, when you're using the alleged hazard as evidence to fine me. The room felt colder, though the thermostat hadn't changed. A couple of board members exchanged glances that said they hadn't signed up for this level of confrontation. Karen straightened, reclaiming the space. This is a private association operating under its own covenants. We are not a court of law. Correct, I agreed. And those covenants still answer to state and federal property law. You don't get to print letterhead and declare sovereignty. Her eyes flashed. Are you threatening the association? I'm stating facts. Do you want to be removed from the community? The question hung heavy. I met her stare without blinking. Is that a threat or an offer? I asked softly. Color rose in her cheeks. Real anger, now not the polished kind. She turned to the table. We'll issue a formal fine for insubordination and interference with board procedure. $250. I reached into my coat pocket and placed a small flash drive on the table between us. It landed with a soft click that seemed louder than it should. What is that? She demanded. Everything, I said. Garage security footage, Otto's internal logs, audio from the last meeting, timestamps of the device operating on your property while you claimed it was under review. All of it. No one touched the drive. You think intimidation will protect you? I continued, looking directly at her. But this stopped being about power the moment you walked onto my land and took what wasn't yours. Now it's about truth. And truth has a way of finding daylight. The meeting ended abruptly after that. No resolution, no closing remarks. Chairs scraped as people filed out, avoiding eye contact. Karen remained seated long after the others left, staring at the flash drive as though it might detonate. Outside, the wind had picked up, driving fine crystals of ice against the windows. I paused on the clubhouse steps, breathing deeply. The cold burned my lungs in a familiar, almost comforting way. The next morning, predictably, the fine arrived, taped to my door in another plastic sleeve. $250 so. Disruptive conduct and procedural interference. I peeled it off, carefully added it to the evidence drawer, and brewed a fresh pot of coffee. From my office window, I watched Otto complete another flawless circuit of Karen's driveway. She stood on the porch in a red coat, arms crossed, surveying her kingdom of brick and ice. She looked smaller somehow, though the distance hadn't changed. I opened the remote interface. Battery 94%. Ambient audio whine, distant dog bark, the low hum of Otto's motor. I didn't send a command, not yet. But I did activate a new logging protocol, high-definition 360-degree capture thermal overlay. Every gesture, every word, every visitor to her door. The storm inside her was building. I could feel it. And when it broke, I intended to be ready. The first real payback came not with thunder, but with the softest whisper of falling snow. It began on an evening when the sky hung low and heavy, the kind of gray that presses down on rooftops and muffles sound. I sat at my fold-out workstation under the stairs, an old military field console I'd salvaged and rebuilt, watching Otto's live feed in split screen. The left showed wide-angle color, the right thermal overlay glowing faint blue and white against the cold. Karen's house sat at the end of the cul-de-sac porch lights, casting warm halos onto the stone steps. Fresh flurries drifted in from the northwest, light enough to dance in the wind, but steady enough to promise accumulation. I checked the weather station on my roof, 8 miles per hour gusts. Temperature dropping toward zero, visibility, moderate, and falling. Perfect. I had not touched the controls in days. Otto remained parked near the corner of Karen's driveway, idle under her porch overhang, gathering frost like a forgotten lawn ornament. She had grown used to him being there, used to the idea that he was hers, now safely neutralized. She had no idea he was still listening. I tapped the screen once. Activate. A soft whir traveled through the digital link as Otto's systems woke. Motors spun up with a low, satisfied hum I could almost feel in my chest. His camera swiveled, scanning the environment. Snow depth, 2 inches and rising. Wind direction, favorable. Proximity to structures, clear. I entered the next command slowly, deliberately. Begin recording. High definition 360-degree audio sensitivity, max. The feed sharpened. Every flake became visible, every breath of wind audible. I watched as Otto reversed smoothly from his parking spot, treads biting into the fresh layer with quiet authority. Then he turned toward the public sidewalk, the strip the HOA was legally responsible for maintaining. He began to clear it. Not aggressively, not obviously. Just thorough, methodical passes that pushed the powder gently to one side. With each sweep, he inched closer to Karen's front walkway, dumping the load in neat rising ridges along the base of her porch. I leaned back, cradling a mug of tea, gone cold hours ago. There was something almost meditative about it, the rhythmic crunch of treads, the soft scrape of the scoop, the way the snow stacked itself higher with every return trip. Otto wasn't blocking anything yet. He was simply doing what he was built to do, clearing paths. Only this time, the path he cleared funneled every flake straight toward one door. By 9:40, a modest bank had formed knee-high at most, the kind of drift that happens naturally on windy nights. Nothing alarming. Nothing that would raise eyebrows if a neighbor glanced out. By 10:15, it kissed the bottom of her storm door. At 10:35, Otto's proximity sensor pinged entry partially obstructed. I allowed myself the faintest curve of a smile. Then the porch light snapped on. The front door cracked open a few inches before slamming against the packed wall. Karen's silhouette appeared, robe pulled tight, slippers on her feet, hair loose for once. She stared down at the white barrier as if it had personally betrayed her. Otto paused immediately, scoop lowered, lights dimmed to standby. He sat there like an obedient sentinel who had simply finished his assigned route. Karen yanked the door harder. Snow crumbled inward, but the wall held. She leaned out, peering left and right, then down at the machine. Move, she hissed, waving a hand. Go on, shoo. Otto did not recognize her gesture as a valid command. I had disabled that weeks ago. Instead, he played his signature chime, 3 bright, cheerful notes that rang clear into the frozen night. Karen froze. I watched her face cycle through confusion, recognition, and something close to fear. She looked at the snow now pressing against the glass, then back at Otto. For a long moment, she stood motionless, breath fogging in rapid bursts. Then she retreated inside and slammed the door. The porch light stayed on. I saved the entire sequence video audio telemetry and backed it up to the encrypted drive. Then I sent Otto back to his idle corner with a single command: stand by. He rolled away obediently, leaving the wall intact. The next morning, a community-wide email went out from the HOA president's address. Due to recent excessive snowfall and concerns over sidewalk accessibility, residents are reminded to assist in keeping front entrances clear. The board is monitoring compliance. No mention of robots. No mention of trapped presidents. I read it over coffee steam rising between me and the screen. Outside, weak sunlight glinted off the fresh blanket. A teenage boy I didn't recognize shoveled a narrow tunnel through Karen's snowbank, while she supervised from the doorway, arms folded tight against the cold. Once the path was barely passable, she waved him away and disappeared inside. Within minutes, Otto stirred again, this time at her gesture. She had stepped out in boots and coat, motioning impatiently. He resumed his loops along her driveway, clearing every trace from her private property while the public sidewalk remained untouched. I watched her pat his housing again, almost affectionately, as if last night had been a bad dream. She still believed she controlled him. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. The ridge in front of her door had already begun to refill with wind-driven drifts. Winter, I'd learned long ago, is patient, and so was I. That evening, I added a new parameter to the drift script: incremental escalation based on accumulation rate. Nothing dramatic, just enough to remind her gently but relentlessly that some walls are built one quiet flake at a time. I saved the update, powered down the console, and listened to the wind pick up outside. Somewhere down the street, Otto waited beneath the porch light camera eye, unblinking. The real storm hadn't even arrived yet. Karen's arrogance grew with every pristine pass Otto made across her driveway. She no longer hid her possession. She paraded it. One crisp Saturday morning, she placed small orange traffic cones along the edges of her walkway, forming a perfect oval loop. Then she stood on the porch in a fur-trimmed parka, gesturing grandly, like a conductor leading an orchestra. Otto obeyed her improvised signals: forward, reverse, tighter turn, carving elegant figure eights through the fresh powder. When he finished, she clapped once, delighted, as if he had performed just for her. From my screen, I watched it all in crystal clarity. The onboard mic picked up every word. "Snowboy, you're a dream," she cooed, patting the camera housing. "That grumpy old veteran doesn't deserve you." Her friend, some woman in designer sunglasses, despite the overcast sky, laughed from the steps. "You should keep it permanently. Call it an HOA asset." "Already working on that," Karen replied, voice dripping satisfaction. "I'm announcing a pilot program next week. My driveway is the test site, of course. Once everyone sees how efficient it is, they'll beg for expansion." I saved the clip, labeled it Admissions Era 1, and felt the cold knot in my stomach tighten another notch. True to her word, the email arrived Monday morning, bold lettering and HOA crest gleaming on the screen. Approved Snow Management Pilot Program. Dear residents, the board is proud to launch a forward-thinking initiative utilizing automated snow clearing technology. This pilot, personally overseen by President Karen Delaney, is currently being tested on select properties to ensure safety and efficacy. Residents are asked not to interfere with the equipment during evaluation. Further updates to follow. Warm regards, Karen Delaney. No mention of whose technology it was, no mention of theft. Just a glossy rebranding of my stolen property as her visionary project. At the mailbox cluster that afternoon, whispers traveled faster than the wind. "Did you see Karen's new toy?" Mrs. Hanley asked, leaning on her cane. "She says the HOA got it through some special grant." Paul snorted softly beside me. "Funny, I seem to remember it rolling out of Miles's garage." Heads turned in my direction. I only shrugged, hands buried in my coat pockets. "Let her talk," I said quietly. "Words are easy. Proof is harder." That evening, I did something I'd resisted until then. I went public, but carefully. I created an anonymous account on a regional newsletter that specialized in small-town governance scandals, the Upper Valley Civic Review. I uploaded 3 short, damning clips: Karen directing Otto with cones like a show pony, Karen mocking me on her porch, and the clearest shot of her claiming, "And now it's mine." No commentary, no inflammatory title, just a single line beneath the videos. This is how our HOA tests community technology. I hit submit, closed the laptop, and went to bed. By Tuesday morning, the post had 12,000 views. By Wednesday, it topped 40,000. Comments poured in, some furious, some incredulous, many sharing their own HOA horror stories. Local Facebook groups picked it up. Someone superimposed a crown on Karen's head in one of the stills. It spread like wildfire. Karen's response was swift and spectacularly tone-deaf. She scheduled a community demonstration for the following Saturday, inviting the entire neighborhood to her home to witness the future of automated snow management, HOA approved. I arrived early, blending into the small crowd gathered on her stamped concrete driveway. Neighbors stamped feet against the cold breath fogging as they waited. Children darted between legs, excited by the promise of a real robot. Karen emerged in a white coat that matched the surroundings, cheeks flushed with importance. Otto sat center stage, freshly polished, a large blue ribbon tied around his chassis like a prize hog at the fair. "Welcome everyone," she began, voice carrying over the murmurs. "Today you'll see state-of-the-art technology that could benefit us all if properly managed, of course." She launched into a rehearsed speech, efficiency, cost savings, safety protocols. Otto performed flawlessly slow, graceful passes that left the driveway gleaming. Applause rippled through the crowd. Someone near the back asked, "Did the HOA purchase this unit?" Karen hesitated a fraction too long. "It's on loan for evaluation purposes. Part of the pilot I emailed about." I stood silently at the edge phone, recording from my pocket. Beside me, Alan Ramos' city badge, visible on his jacket, watched with professional interest. Near the end of the demonstration, Karen leaned toward a cluster of board members and friends, voice low, but perfectly captured by Otto's directional mic. "I should have taken this thing from that weirdo months ago," she muttered. "Saved everyone the headache." At that exact moment, Otto completed his final pass, and following a preloaded script I'd uploaded the night before, played his 3-note victory chime. Loud, clear, unmistakable. The crowd fell silent. Every head swiveled toward the little machine, then toward Karen. Her face drained of color so fast, I thought she might faint. A few neighbors exchanged glances. Someone in the back whispered, "That's the same sound it made when it used to clear the Hanley's walk." Karen recovered with a forced laugh. "Just a programmed flourish. Very charming, isn't it?" But the spell was broken. People began drifting away, conversations buzzing louder than before. Alan caught my eye and gave a small nod. I walked home through the crunch of fresh frost hands in my pockets, feeling the shift in the air as clearly as an incoming front. The videos from the demonstration, recorded by half a dozen phones, were online by supper time. The original post now topped 150,000 views. Hashtags appeared, #SnowbotGate, #HOA Karen. Karen stopped using Otto openly after that. He sat parked under her porch overhang, gathering a thin cape of snowlights dark. She must have thought the silence meant safety. She was wrong. The forecast for the following week showed a monster storm brewing over Canada, historic snowfall blizzard warnings, the kind of system that shuts down highways and buries cars to their roofs. I checked Otto's battery, 100%. Systems nominal. Position still on her property. I opened the drift script and added a new conditional layer tied to wind speed and accumulation rate. Then I saved it, poured a fresh mug of coffee, and waited for the sky to darken. The real winter, the one that doesn't ask permission, was almost here. And this time Karen would feel every flake. The blizzard arrived without mercy. Meteorologists had tracked it for days, a massive low-pressure system, barreling down from Canada, loaded with Arctic air and lake-effect moisture. They threw around words like historic and once in a generation, but in northern Minnesota, we've heard that before. We stocked shelves, checked generators, taped windows if we felt dramatic. Most of us simply waited the way you wait for an old enemy you know by name. Thursday afternoon, the sky turned the color of tarnished pewter. Wind howled in off the plains, sharp enough to slice through any exposed skin. By 3 o'clock, the first bands hit horizontal sheets of snow driven sideways, erasing the horizon in minutes. Visibility collapsed to a few yards. Streetlights flickered on, early glowing like lost buoys in a white sea. I watched it all from my office, bundled in layers, a pot of coffee keeping warm on the side table. My own driveway, I left deliberately untouched. A thin blanket already covered it, and I had no intention of disturbing the natural order tonight. Otto sat exactly where Karen had left him 2 days earlier, under the overhang of her porch, half-dusted with fresh powder lights dark. She hadn't summoned him since the disastrous demonstration. Perhaps embarrassment, perhaps caution. It didn't matter. His battery read 100%, systems dry and warm inside his sealed chassis, camera lens clear. At 7:22, the power flickered once, twice, then held. My backup generator hummed to life seamlessly. Across the neighborhood, lights dimmed and vanished in patches. I pulled up the grid map on my secondary monitor. Karen's block went dark at 9:10. Her porch camera, the one she'd bragged about installing for security, died with the rest. But Otto's independent feed stayed bright and steady. By 9:30, the HOA group chat lit up like a distress beacon. Anyone have a generator they can spare? Karen's cul-de-sac is completely drifted shut. No plows on secondary streets tonight. She's stuck inside, says her door won't open more than a crack. Is anyone running that robot tonight? Why isn't it clearing her walk like usual? I read the messages without replying, fingers resting lightly on the console. Outside, the wind screamed around the eaves. Snow piled in waves against windows, soft and relentless. My weather station recorded gusts to 45 miles an hour, accumulation already past 18 inches and climbing fast. At 10:05, I opened the remote interface. One green dot pulsed auto online ready. I drew a slow breath, tasting the cold that seeped through even sealed glass. Then I typed a single command. Wake. On screen, Otto's status lights blinked awake. Motors spun up with a low growl, lost to the storm. His camera rotated, assessing whiteout conditions, zero visibility, beyond 10 feet driveway, buried under 4 feet of drift, Karen's SUV, a shapeless white mound. I guided him forward, with the joystick, slow, deliberate. Treads bit deep, carving twin trenches as he advanced. But I didn't send him toward the street or the garage. I sent him straight back up her front walkway. First pass, he scooped a narrow channel along the steps, then pivoted and dumped the load in a high, neat arc against the base of her porch, adding deliberately to the wall he'd begun weeks earlier. Second pass, higher, tighter, compacting the new layer against the old. Third pass, the ridge rose past the storm door handle. I worked in silence, the only sounds the wind's roar and the occasional creak of the house settling under weight. Each dump was measured almost gentle. Nothing that would damage property. Nothing that violated any code. After all, he was clearing the public sidewalk and simply redirecting the snow to the nearest available space. By 10:26, the wall stood chest high, a solid wind-packed barricade, glowing faintly blue in the thermal view. Karen's silhouette appeared behind the frosted glass of her front window, pacing, phone to her ear, gesturing frantically. Her lights had flickered back briefly on city backup power, but the door remained sealed behind white. At 10:43, a private text arrived, the first time she had ever messaged me directly. Karen, I need the robot now. Door is blocked. Send it to clear my entrance, please. I stared at the screen a long time. The word please looked foreign in her typing, small and uncertain. I left it on red. Instead, I entered one final command. Sentry mode active. Otto's running lights shifted to steady red. He reversed a few feet, parked squarely in front of the buried steps, and went still. Camera recording sensors alert, a silent guardian in the heart of the storm. Battery 78%. Operational time remaining 7 hours. Outside, the blizzard raged on, piling drift upon drift. Inside Karen's house, heat held for now, but the world beyond her walls had become unreachable. I turned off the console, poured the last of the coffee, and stood at the window. The street was gone. Houses were soft white hills. Only the orange glow of distant street lamps proved civilization still existed. Somewhere in that whiteness, Otto kept watch. And for the first time since losing my wife, the silence in my house didn't feel lonely. It felt like justice, cold patient, and finally arriving on its own terms. I raised the mug toward the storm. Stay warm, Karen, I whispered to the wind. Then I went to bed, leaving the generator humming, and Otto standing sentinel through the longest night of the year. Dawn crept in reluctantly, a pale gray wash over a world remade in white. I woke before the alarm, drawn to the window by the sudden stillness. The wind had died sometime in the night, leaving only the occasional creak of overloaded branches and the distant hum of city plows on main roads. Snow lay in sculpted drifts, taller than cars, smooth and untouched, except for the narrow tracks of emergency vehicles far away. The cul-de-sac looked like a blank canvas. Every roof, every mailbox, every fence post softened into anonymous humps. Karen's house stood out only because of the wall. It rose in front of her porch, like a frozen wave, frozen mid-crash, 6 feet at its crest, wind-packed and gleaming in the weak light. Her SUV was a white hill with only the antenna poking through. No footprints marred the snow around her door. No one had come. No one had been able to. Otto remained exactly where I'd left him, parked at the base of the barricade, lights off, a thin cap of fresh powder on his chassis, like a sentinel's helmet. I brewed coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in and opened the console. Battery 63%. Sensors clear. Internal temperature nominal. I switched to the legacy manual panel, the simple interface I'd written in the early days when Otto was still a weekend project. My finger hovered over the command I'd waited weeks to send. Otto, Y said aloud, voice low in the quiet house, returned to base. On screen, his lights blinked once acknowledgement. Motors whirred softly as he reversed from the wall, treads crunching through the crust. He turned down Karen's driveway, carving a shallow path past the buried mailbox, then angled onto the sidewalk. Progress was slow. The snow reached his scoop in places, but he pushed steadily forward, chime silent this time. I watched the entire journey from the front window, coffee cooling in my hand. 10 minutes later, he rounded the bend, frost glittering on every surface, looking like a small armored vehicle returning from patrol. He paused at my garage door, scanned the RFID tag, and rolled inside with the patient dignity of something that had never truly left. I closed the door behind him and knelt to brush the ice from his treads. Scratches marred the paint salt, rash minor dings from packed drifts, but the core was solid. I plugged him into the charger and ran a full diagnostic. Green across the board. Home. That afternoon, the HOA thread remained eerily quiet. No updates, no pleas for help. Power had returned to most houses by noon. I could see lights glowing behind neighbors' curtains, but Karen's front door stayed shut. At 3:12, my console pinged, unauthorized access attempt detected. Someone Karen's phone, MAC address unmistakable, had opened the old gesture control app she'd reverse engineered weeks ago. She was trying to wake Otto to send him back down the hill for one more rescue sweep. Every command she entered routed straight to me now. I smiled small and genuine, and activated the surprise script I'd written the night she stole him. Redirect. Otto backed smoothly out of the garage on his own. The 3-note chime rang out bright, unmistakable, in the cold afternoon air. Neighbors shoveling nearby paused and turned. He rolled down the street past curious faces straight to Karen's lawn. The ground was frozen solid beneath the snow. No damage to grass come spring. HOA covenants were conveniently vague about temporary emergency routes during extreme weather events. I had the clause highlighted and ready. Otto approached the great wall he'd built, stopped a respectful distance away, and began the final performance. He spun in place, scoop rising, and started rebuilding, pushing fresh loads from the sidewalk and lawn, edges compacting them layer by layer against the existing barricade. Higher, tighter, smoother. A monument of packed powder that would take heavy equipment hours to breach. From the internal mic, I heard her voice muffled at first, then sharp with panic. Stop it right now. She pounded on the inside of the door. The snow swallowed the sound. Otto ignored her. He no longer recognized that voice as authorized. Neighbors gathered at safe distances, some offering to help, others simply watching. A few pulled out phones. One man laughed outright. Looks like modern art, he called. The Great Snow Gate. By sunset, the wall stood nearly 7 feet, curving slightly for stability, a gleaming white fortress sealing her in. I stood on my own porch, in the fading light, parka zipped, steam rising from a fresh mug. The sky had cleared to a deep, cold blue. Stars were already pricking through. Across the street, curtains twitched in Karen's windows, but the door stayed shut. She had heat. She had food. City crews had restored power. She was safe. But she was alone with the consequences of every rule she'd bent, every boundary she'd crossed. Paul appeared beside me, shovel over his shoulder. Quite the installation, he said quietly. Nature's work, I replied. I just facilitated. He nodded, eyes on the wall. Folks are talking. Really talking. About bylaws. About elections. About trust. I sipped my tea and said nothing. That night, someone, Alan, my attorney, or perhaps both, uploaded the blizzard footage to the same accountability network that had hosted the earlier clips. 37 seconds, Otto's silent, methodical construction of the wall under howling wind, Karen's frantic silhouette pacing behind glass, and the final 3-note chime echoing into the storm. No commentary needed. By morning, it had 500,000 views. By evening, local news vans lined the plowed main road, cameras pointed toward our quiet cul-de-sac. Reporters knocked politely. I answered, once thermos in hand. Did you trap your neighbor with a robot? One asked. Microphone extended. I built a machine to clear paths, I said. Some people just stand in their own way. The clip aired on every channel. Hashtags multiplied. Complaint emails flooded the HOA inbox, hundreds, then thousands, from our neighborhood and beyond. Karen's curtains stayed drawn. The board issued a carefully worded statement about ongoing internal review, but the damage was irreversible. A whistleblower leaked internal memos proving Karen had planned the seizure weeks in advance, not for safety, but to bolster her re-election campaign with a flashy community initiative. The memos went viral by breakfast. That evening, her resignation appeared in the inbox, terse, dateless final. Effective immediately, I am stepping down as HOA president for personal reasons. I wish the community continued success. No apology, no explanation. Just retreat. I read it once, closed the laptop, and walked to the garage. Otto sat charging lights soft green. I rested a hand on his cold metal housing. Good work, old friend, I said. Outside, the first stars glittered above the melting edges of the Great Wall. The tide had turned, and for the first time in months, the neighborhood felt like it belonged to all of us again. The thaw began slowly, the way real change always does. First came the drip of icicles under a weak February sun, then the soft rumble of snow sliding from roofs in heavy sheets. Little rivers formed along curb lines, carrying grit and salt toward storm drains. The Great Wall in front of Karen's porch, once a gleaming monument, shrank day by day, carved down by city maintenance crews with shovels and a small front-end loader. By the end of the week, it was only a dirty ridge and then nothing at all. Karen remained inside through most of it. Curtains stayed drawn during daylight. Her SUV left the driveway only once late at night, returning before dawn. No one waved when she passed, not out of cruelty, but because the neighborhood had quietly, collectively moved on. The HOA board scrambled. Emergency meetings were called, agendas, circulated votes taken in hushed tones. Paul Quiet Steady Paul, who had baked cookies as a gesture of solidarity, was nominated temporary president. The vote wasn't even close. His first act was to table every pending fine, including the stack taped to my door over the winter. His second was to draft a new motion to immediately return all property seized under the unauthorized autonomous device ordinance and to suspend enforcement of related covenants pending independent legal review. It passed unanimously. 2 days later, a formal letter arrived, hand-signed by every remaining board member on fresh letterhead that no longer carried Karen's flourished signature at the bottom. Dear Mr. Weaver, the board extends its sincere regret for the events of recent months. Your snow clearing device will be returned upon request. All fines assessed against your property have been voided and removed from record. We are committed to rebuilding trust and welcome your input as we revise our governing documents. I read it at the kitchen table, Otto charging quietly in the corner like a sleeping hound. I didn't feel triumph exactly, more like the slow exhale after holding your breath longer than you realized. I carried the letter to the garage and set it on the workbench beside Otto's open diagnostics panel. He had a few new scratches, a dent in one tread guard, but nothing that affected function. I ran a soft cloth over his camera lens, clearing away the last traces of road salt. We're not done yet, I told him. That same week, the city released its official summary of the HOA investigation. No criminal charges, civil matters rarely cross that line. But the language was sharp: breach of fiduciary duty, unauthorized seizure of private property, personal use of confiscated equipment for individual benefit. Karen was barred from holding any elected neighborhood office for 10 years. Some residents wanted more lawsuits, public apologies, perhaps even her forced sale of the house. I didn't join those conversations. The system that had enabled her overreach was being dismantled. That felt like enough. Paul knocked one evening, carrying a clipboard thick with printed pages. We're starting over, he said, stepping inside out of the chill. Clean bylaws, term limits, transparent budgets. Spending approvals require resident vote over a certain threshold, and we want your eyes on it before it goes out. We sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours, steam rising from mugs of cider. Otto rested in his dock green charging light steady. Paul read each section aloud. I marked ambiguities, suggested clearer language, struck vague clauses that could be weaponized later. When we finished, he leaned back and laughed, quiet, surprised. We should have put you on the board years ago. I'd rather build things that help, I said, not argue about them. He smiled. You did both. The following weekend, I reprogrammed Otto's primary route. No more solitary loops around my own driveway. He would begin at the community mailbox cluster, clearing a wide safe space for everyone, then proceed to the Hanley's Walk, then Paul's, then any home with residents over 60 who had opted in via a simple sign-up sheet Paul circulated. No fees, no approvals, no fines for non-participation. Just help offered freely. The first morning he set out under a pale spring sky, I walked behind him at a distance. Neighbors emerged as he passed, some to watch, some to wave. Mrs. Hanley stood on her porch in slippers, eyes shining as the path in front of her steps appeared smooth and salted. A young father lifted his toddler onto his shoulders so the boy could see the robot snow truck better. When Otto finished the Hanley's walk and turned toward Paul's house, someone started clapping. Others joined. By the time he chimed his 3 cheerful notes and rolled back toward my garage, half the block was outside, applauding not for me but for the simple decency of a clear path in a world that had felt treacherous for too long. I didn't smile outwardly, but inside something long knotted began to loosen. That night I received one final email. Blank subject line, no text, sender Karen Delaney. I stared at it for a long moment, then archived it without replying. Some conversations end not with words but with silence. And sometimes silence is the kindest answer of all. Outside, the last patches of snow melted into the greening grass. Crocuses pushed up along foundation lines, defiant purple and gold. The air carried the faint, clean scent of thaw earth, waking water, running winter, finally releasing its grip. I stood on the porch in shirt sleeves for the first time in months, watching street lamps flicker on as dusk settled. Otto sat parked by the mailbox, lights off, job complete. Across the way, Karen's house was lit softly behind curtains. Her SUV sat in the driveway, a for sale sign staked discreetly near the road. I didn't watch long. The neighborhood no longer revolved around her. It revolved around us, all of us, learning slowly and imperfectly how to live beside one another without needing to rule. And that felt like the truest victory of all. Spring arrived not with fanfare but with the quiet insistence of water finding its way. One morning, I stepped outside to find the last stubborn snowbank along the north side of the house had collapsed overnight, leaving a muddy puddle that reflected a sky finally truly blue. The air carried the sharp green scent of awakening soil and the distant hum of someone mowing the first tentative grass. Icicles were gone, gutters ran clear. The neighborhood looked softer around the edges, as if the long winter had sanded down its sharp corners. Otto's new route had become a daily ritual everyone noticed, but no one questioned. He started at dawn, rolling out with a soft whir that drew curtains aside and brought smiles to doorsteps. The mailbox cluster stayed clear no matter how many flyers the wind scattered. The Hanley's walk was salted before Mrs. Hanley's first cup of tea. Paul's driveway gleamed by the time his kids caught the school bus. Other homes joined quietly, small orange flags appearing in yards like signals of surrender to kindness. I often walked the route behind him at a distance, hands in pockets, breathing deeply. Children waved now without hesitation. Mr. Hanley saluted with his cane one morning, eyes bright. A plate of lemon bars appeared on my porch, another day no. Note just the sweet citrus scent of gratitude. Karen's house sold quickly once the sign went up. A young family moved in by early May, 2 small kids, and a golden retriever that bounded through the fresh grass, as if the yard had always been theirs. They waved when they saw me. I waved back. The past stayed buried under new sod and new laughter. One evening in late May, as the sun hung low and golden over the rooftops, I stood on my porch with a glass of iced tea, watching Otto complete his final loop. He paused at the mailbox cluster sensor, sweeping one last time, then chimed his 3 familiar notes, bright, cheerful, unhurried, and rolled home. The garage door rose for him like an old friend opening an arm. I met him inside, ran a hand along his weathered chassis. The scratches from the blizzard had been touched up, but I left a few, the small ones, as reminders. He docked himself with a soft click, lights fading to standby. "Good night, partner," I said quietly. The house settled around us, quiet in the way I had once craved and now simply appreciated. No wind-rattling windows, no distant arguments from HOA meetings, just the low hum of the charger and the faint tick of cooling metal. Later I walked the block one last time before full dark. Street lamps flickered on, casting warm pools over sidewalks Otto had kept safe all winter. Porch lights glowed in nearly every house. People sat outside, some on chairs, some on steps, talking in low voices, laughing occasionally. A child's bike lay abandoned in a driveway, training wheels glinting. The golden retriever barked once in playful chase. No one hurried inside when I passed. A few nodded. One man new to the street raised his beer bottle in casual salute. I nodded back. At the corner, I paused beneath the big maple that shaded the mailbox cluster. Its leaves were fully open now, rustling softly in the evening breeze. I looked down the street toward my house lights on and the kitchen window garage door closed everything in its place. Peace hadn't come dramatically. No speeches, no ceremonies. It had arrived the way spring does, one melted patch at a time, one clear path, one small act of service, until the whole landscape changed. I thought of my wife then, not with the sharp ache that used to catch me unawares, but with a gentle warmth. She would have liked this neighborhood now. She would have liked Otto's cheerful chime and the way people waved again. I turned for home, footsteps unhurried on the dry pavement. Behind me, the street settled into night porch lights, steady windows glowing, the soft sounds of ordinary lives resuming after a long, hard freeze. Ahead, my own light waited. And for the first time since moving here, the silence in my house felt full of memory, full of purpose, full of the quiet satisfaction that comes when you clear a path, not just for yourself, but for everyone willing to walk it. Otto's charger clicked off with a final contented beep. I closed the door, turned off the porch light, and let the evening close around us. Winter was over. The story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about what grows when the snow finally melts, and in this little corner of northern Minnesota, something strong and green had taken root.